Imagine if you could absorb knowledge almost effortlessly, maybe even, while you're asleep. Sounds a bit like science fiction, doesn't it?
It really does.
But what if there's actually a real way your brain can continue working on your English, even as you're getting some much-needed rest?
It does sound intriguing, and well, the core idea connects to some pretty fascinating aspects of how our brains actually process and retain information. We're about to delve into that.
Exactly, because today we're taking a deep dive into this whole concept of learning English during sleep. And to make this real, we're looking at the experiences of Sarah, an English language learner who's actively using a nightly routine with some, well, encouraging results. Our insights for this deep dive come from a great episode of the Speak Fluent English Learning on the Go podcast.
Yeah, and Sarah's proactive approach to learning, it's really led her to explore all sorts of strategies. Her nighttime routine, it offers a really compelling example of how someone can intentionally engage with English learning in, well, a pretty unique way.
So for you listening right now, the mission of this deep dive is to really grasp the underlying principles. How could sleep potentially support your English learning? We want to unpack the key ideas and offer some practical steps you might actually want to consider incorporating into your own routine, perhaps, as you wind down for the night.
Okay, so let's address the initial skepticism straight away. Because it's really important to understand you won't suddenly master complex grammar rules or, memorize vast amounts of new vocabulary just by listening to something while you're fully unconscious.
Right.
Our brains just aren't sponges in that state.
Right. So no magic fluency pills disguised as bedtime stories then.
Exactly.
But here's where it gets really interesting. During sleep, especially in certain phases, your brain is actually actively involved in something called memory consolidation.
Memory consolidation. Yeah, think of it like your brain organizing its files at the end of the day. It's deciding what information from the day is important enough to save, to store for later, and information you've encountered before you fall asleep gets processed, gets strengthened during this time.
Ah, okay. So it's not about your brain learning completely new things while you're dreaming or something. The crucial point is that this potential for sleep learning, it builds upon what you've already studied. Is that right?
That's exactly it. You need to have encountered the material beforehand for your brain to then work on solidifying it overnight.
Okay.
That's a key distinction. And it directly relates to Sarah's routine. Before she even thinks about any kind of, let's call it sleep learning, she engages in what she calls light English review, just for about 10 to 15 minutes. This sort of sets the stage for what her brain might then process later on.
Okay, so we've got the foundation, memory consolidation, prior exposure. Now, how does Sarah actually do this? What are the specific steps in her night routine that she believes help her English, maybe even while she's asleep? I'm really curious to hear the details.
Well, Sarah emphasizes keeping it simple and consistent, which, let's be honest, are often the cornerstones of any successful habit.
Sure.
Her routine apparently starts around 9:30 p.m., and the very first thing she does is switch off all social media.
Wow, a very disciplined move. I think many of us could probably benefit from that. What's the reasoning behind it?
As Sarah explained it, it's partly about creating a calmer mental state before sleep, but also that blue light from screens, the constant stream of notifications, it can interfere with your ability to focus and really wind down properly, which in turn can have a negative impact on that memory consolidation we were just talking about.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Okay, so step one, minimizing distractions. What's next in Sarah's routine then?
Next up, she spends about 10 minutes on some light English reading. She mentioned things like short stories or maybe articles as her preferred choices.
Okay.
And she uses this specific technique that's quite interesting. She underlines any new words she comes across, but she doesn't stop reading to look them up right then and there. She keeps her focus on understanding the overall meaning, enjoying the reading process itself.
Ah, that's a clever way to stay engaged. So she's encountering new vocabulary and context without completely disrupting her reading flow.
Exactly. After that, for about, say, 15 to 20 minutes, Sarah listens to an English podcast or maybe a YouTube video in English, and crucially, she turns on the subtitles.
Okay.
Her aim here isn't to understand every single word perfectly. Instead, she describes it more like letting the sounds and rhythms of the language kind of wash over her. It's more passive listening.
Right, so she's getting that auditory input, hearing the language, while also seeing the words, but without the pressure of actively trying to analyze everything. Sounds like a very relaxed way to absorb the language, actually.
It is, and this leads us to what Sarah refers to as the interesting part, the sleep learning element itself. As she gets into bed and starts preparing to fall asleep, she plays English audio tracks.
Okay, this is what I've been waiting to hear about. What kind of audio does she choose? Is it like
Wait,
lessons or?
she mentioned two main types: vocabulary repetition exercises
Ah,
and English affirmations. The important thing here, she stressed, is that the audio is clear, slow, and pretty easy to follow, and she keeps the volume quite low, playing it for about an hour as she drifts off.
an hour. Wow, that's quite a significant amount of exposure.
Yeah.
And you mentioned affirmations. Can you give us some examples of what she listens to?
Yeah, certainly. Sarah shared a few specific affirmations she uses, things like, I'm confident in my English speaking, or English is becoming easier for me, and I understand and express myself clearly.
Huh. That's really interesting. So it's not just about the language input, the words and sounds, but also about reinforcing a positive mental attitude towards learning English. It's
Exactly.
like a combination of subconscious language exposure and, I guess, positive self-suggestion.
Precisely. You could call it a holistic approach, really. It combines that linguistic input with the power of belief and positive self-talk.
So the big question then, does all of this actually lead to noticeable improvements in her English? I mean, Sarah believes it does, but let's explore that a bit more critically.
Yeah, that's the key point, isn't it? And Sarah's actually quite realistic about it. She really stresses that it's not a magic bullet. You won't suddenly wake up fluent after doing this for a few
Right,
nights.
of course.
However, she has observed tangible benefits over time.
Such as, what specific improvements has she actually experienced?
Well, she specifically mentioned improved vocabulary recall.
Okay.
Words that she had encountered during her light reading or that passive listening practice seemed to stick in her memory more effectively afterwards.
She also noticed an improvement in her listening comprehension, which she attributes to that consistent exposure to English audio, even the stuff playing while she was falling asleep.
That makes sense, actually. Even in a passive state, maybe just falling asleep, your brain is still processing sounds and patterns to some extent. So it's likely reinforcing those auditory connections, perhaps.
Exactly. As we discussed earlier, it really seems to be more about strengthening existing knowledge, reinforcing things, rather than acquiring entirely new information while you're fully asleep.
Got it.
And Sarah also emphasized something else, that this routine has become a habit, a real habit. She feels like her brain now almost anticipates that English exposure as part of her wind down before sleep.
It's like training your brain to expect and even welcome the language learning process as part of your evening routine, like setting the stage.
Precisely. And this highlights, I think, a crucial principle in language learning generally.
Hmm.
Consistency often yields much better long-term results than, say, intense but infrequent study sessions.
Short, regular engagement, like Sarah's 15-20 minutes of pre-sleep activities daily, can be way more effective than trying to cram in 3 hours once a week, for example.
Absolutely. It's that classic difference between, yeah, cramming the night before a test versus studying regularly over time. The latter definitely leads to better retention and deeper understanding.
Okay, so now for those of you listening who are intrigued by Sarah's routine and might be considering trying something similar, what are some practical takeaways to keep in mind?
Great question. So if you're thinking, hey, this sounds interesting, maybe something I could try, where should you even begin? It sounds like a lot, maybe.
Well, Sarah's first piece of advice is really simple. Start small.
Okay.
You absolutely don't need to immediately jump into implementing an hour of sleep audio. Maybe just dedicating 5 minutes to some light English reading, followed by 5 minutes of listening. That could be a great starting point.
Yeah.
The key is to make it feel manageable, not overwhelming. And as Sarah wisely put it, just do it daily.
Mm,
Consistency is what matters most here.
that makes it feel much more achievable. Just a few minutes to ease into it. What's another practical tip?
Tip number 2 would be to avoid complex grammar or really challenging new concepts right before bed.
Good point.
The evening study or engagement should be light and relaxing. Think of it maybe like brushing your teeth. It's a consistent habit you do without significant mental strain. You want your brain to associate this time with relaxation, not with intense cognitive effort.
That's a good analogy. Keep the evening engagement with English easy and enjoyable. Okay, what about the audio aspect? Any practical advice there for setting it up?
Yes, regarding the audio setup. If you share a sleeping space, obviously, consider using headphones, earbuds maybe.
Right.
If not, a small Bluetooth speaker placed nearby could work well. The crucial thing here, though, is to choose soft, slow-paced audio. Definitely avoid anything loud, jarring, or that deals with, say, stressful news topics right before sleep. The aim is to create a soothing linguistic environment.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be jolted awake by a sudden loud burst of English grammar rules.
Definitely not.
Okay, one final practical tip maybe for our listeners.
Finally, and this is important, Sarah really emphasizes the importance of cultivating a positive mindset, basically, to believe in the process. Progress in language learning, especially through subtle methods like this one, can be gradual. It's often not dramatic overnight. So reassure yourself that even if you don't see huge results immediately, your brain is still processing and reinforcing the language on some level.
Right. Trust the process.
Yeah.
So to quickly recap then, we've explored this fascinating idea of how memory consolidation during sleep could potentially support your English learning.
Mm.
We looked at Sarah's very practical nightly routine, that mix of light reading, passive listening, and then that targeted English audio as she falls asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And we've highlighted those crucial elements, starting small, keeping it light in the evenings, choosing the right kind of audio, and importantly, maintaining a positive outlook.
Yeah, and it's just vital to remember, again, this approach isn't about achieving fluency overnight. That's not realistic. It's more about subtly reinforcing knowledge you already have, building a consistent habit of engaging with English, and maybe fostering a more positive connection with the language, even possibly while you're asleep.
And on that note, here's maybe a final thought for you to consider as you go about your day or perhaps as you prepare for your night. Think about a specific area of your English learning, maybe vocabulary or pronunciation, that you might want to subtly try and consolidate during your sleep. Or perhaps consider one positive affirmation related to your English that you could incorporate into your own bedtime routine. It's really all about discovering those small, consistent ways to keep moving forward on your language learning journey, maybe even as you dream.